Hey guys, this is Collin Moshman for TournamentPokerEdge.com, and today we have a $2 180-man MTT SNG played recently on PokerStars, and we're going to be talking about the optimal strategy for these and related on-demand and MTT SNG formats. So let's check this out. Very first hand, I would be folding 10-9 suited. With that said, there's plenty of room for styles here. So for me, bottom of my opening range should be Jack 10 suited. And I think that you would be too tight for sure if you're folding a hand like King Jack suited, and you would be too loose if you're opening a hand like 7-6 suited. And with a hand like 10-9 suited, I'm totally fine opening this hand, folding this hand. So here we elect to put in the slightly looser open. See what happens. We face a 3-bet. And I would fold facing this 3-bet, which I know feels really tight. We're getting odds of almost 2.5 to 1. We have the 10-9 suited. But there are a couple of problems here. One is that the hijack might be in a very tight range. His range might be something like Jacks plus Ace King or even tighter. And another issue here is that there is some slight chance that UTG plus 1 puts out the 4-bet, which would be pretty disastrous to invest 225 pre and not even get to take a flop. So I would just go ahead and toss this hand. And I'm going to make a prediction that Leviathan does have a strong hand here. So it'd be an unusual time facing action from UTG and UTG plus 1 to make a light 3-bet. So here I would expect him to be c-betting most of his range. So we're not going to learn too much. At the turn, we learn a bit more. So here, if Leviathan were to check back, I would think this was often going to be pocket jacks or pocket kings. Most ace-x hands or monsters like a set of queens are going to keep on firing. If he was 3-betting pre-flop with air, I would expect him to continue betting here and rep the ace. Pretty small sizing, but that is going to take it. Unfortunately, we don't get to see the showdown, but for sure I would give this player credit for having a real hand most of the time. With King-Queen offsuit, you really want to think in spots like this about avoiding a significant mistake. And here, I don't think there are going to be too many ways pre that you can make a huge mistake unless you do something crazy like jam. So for me, I would not fold this hand, but I don't think it's a big mistake to. We're out of position. It's far from a monster, so you could just nit fold here without leaving too much behind, I think. For flatting, that's another valid option. We have decent equity against the cutoff's range, and even though we're out of position, we're getting better than 2 to 1. So with King-Queen suited, I really like flatting here. That hand is much more playable. With offsuit, I'm not going to do as much flatting from the small blind, but that is a valid option. And the play I like best is to 3-bet. So we block a lot of strong hands in the cutoff's range for continuing facing 3-bet. We're out of position, so we look to nullify that positional disadvantage. And sizing-wise, if we're going to do that, we can make it around 225. So great play here. Definitely wouldn't size it any higher than this, but very nice 3-bet. You might say, what if our opponent jams? And if we face 4-bet here, we would definitely be folding. I mean, this we knew our opponent is a total maniac. All right, so we're opening the Ace-Queen suited. Very nice flop for us. And, one thing we can think about here, first of all, is like how much equity do we have? And so we likely have 6 outs to pair. We have another 4 clean outs to spike the nut straight. And we have at least 1 out from a backdoor nut flush draw. So here we have 11 outs. The way you can think about that in terms of converting to equity is at the flop you multiply by 4, so we're at 44, and then you subtract 1 when you're above 8 for every out above 8. So here we would go from 44 to 41. So you might say, well, roughly speaking, we have low 40s or about 41% equity here. So in other words, that's very good multi-way. And there's also a chance that Ace-Queen High is the best hand. I will go ahead and bet, facing check raise, we could continue. We might fold out a hand like pocket 6s, pocket 3s, which would, we gain a tremendous amount from doing that because those hands do have an equity advantage against us. So I would generally c-bet here. It also gives us the flexibility when we c-bet. If everybody folds, that's great. If we get a caller, then we're going to check back probably most blank turns so we can take advantage of our position and have that flexibility. So that's normally what I would do. But with that said, I don't mind this flop check back. We have plenty of showdown value. We'd obviously prefer not to get check raised. And facing this bet of half pot, we're probably going to call most turns. So the turn is a blank, like it's a deuce through 4, a 6. It pairs the flop. It improves us. We'll continue on. But 7, 8s, 9s, those are probably going to be some of the cards we fold. So I agree with this decision to fold turn. Here opens with pocket 5s. Under 50 blinds, I'm going to be usually opening 2.5x here. But that's not too important. Key thing here is that from mid position, in structures with an ante, we should open the pocket 5s, which is exactly what hero does. I'm going to c-bet this flop, charge our opponent, and we'll take that one down. So let's talk about king 9 suited. I'm going to open any suited Broadway hand from UTG, like I either said or maybe kind of implied in that discussion of 10-9 suited in the very first hand. So if we're going to open king 10 suited UTG, we should be able to open king 9 suited from middle position. So that's a good way to think about being consistent with your ranges, that kind of thought process. So here, I like this open. I think it'll be fine to fold as well. I would be folding king 8 suited, personally opening king 9 suited bottom, and wouldn't have a problem with somebody who folded this hand. And here's c-bet. So if we check, we're just going to be check folding and giving up. And we can get our opponent to fold a lot of ace-x hands. You know, if he's got any kind of hand like ace-jack of spades, he's just going to fold. You know, ace-king without a diamond, good chance is just going to fold. So I like the decision to c-bet. Opponent's min-raise doesn't make a ton of sense given how coordinated the flop is, but I wouldn't do anything to challenge him here. It's going to be too tough out of position, too expensive. So a nice line in this hand. Ace 3, we're going to check. But one thing I would note here is that if the people involved were later position, so let's say, for example, it's hijack, cutoff, button, and small blind. I think that will be the right number of players to keep the pot the same. Then I would jam the ace 3 off. Here I don't hate jamming, but considering the first limper is UTG, I would likely check here. If I had pocket deuces, I would jam. This hand I would check, but you can modify it a bit, so we would want to jam. Your checks, which I like. Our plan would be to check call if we faced a bet of, let's say, half pot or less. If somebody bet like 220, I would just fold. And it gets checked around, which is nice. So here we're going to bet out a lot of turns. I shouldn't say a lot of turns, some turns. In particular, if the turn paired the flop, I would bet. And those are the main ones, really. Ace would be good too. This king, we're just going to check fold 5 to the flop. Here with pocket kings, we're going to ISO raise. Sizing wise, I would go 200. This is perfect. And we get multi-way action. So this is, I've seen memes like this, people post on Facebook, something like, pocket kings on Poker Stars. The flop is always going to have, let's say it's black kings, ace of hearts and then 2 lower hearts. So this is one of these kind of stereotypical hands. You get 2 opponents, pocket queens, a very bad flop like this. So I like this decision to check. And this is interesting. Our opponent jams, and I would fold here, but look at this. Hero goes ahead and makes the call. And so I'm very interested to know what his thought process is here. And I think part of it I can guess. Part of it is that he might be thinking, well, why is my opponent so quick to shut me out? Like if he did flop a flush, for example, he's probably not just going to overbet shove. He's going to want to get action. So that weakens his range a little bit. Now, that's important. The only thing is that there's a good chance that he's doing this for protection. So he's got some kind of hand like, let's say, king-jack, and is looking to protect that hand. So probably what you want here is not just to cap his range, but also to know something about our opponent and know that he's playing very loose. Let's say, for example, that he's playing stats of 49/31 VPIP PFR. That's going to make us much more inclined to make this kind of call. So I think it's that combination of capping his range and having a read that he's extremely loose that gets here to make this call. So let's be a little bit results oriented and see if you're quote unquote right. I say quote unquote, and this is an amazing run out for our hand because we're only going to see one hand, which doesn't tell us our opponent's full range. So if, for example, he does have ace king, that doesn't mean that his range isn't very wide. At the same time, if he's got some kind of crazy hand like 3 deuce, then we know that he must have plenty of junky hands in his range. That's exactly what happens. He has 100% complete and total air. So I think Hero is acting on a great read here, and this is a really nice pot to win. Pocket sixes, we can flat in position. I don't like 3-betting here. We're too deep to jam at 26 blinds effective. I mean, jamming might be profitable, but for me, this is slightly more than I would want to jam. Slightly weak to fold. So another one where pre-flop. The only option I really don't like pre-flop here is a small 3-bet because we don't want to call or fold facing 4-bet. So we should eliminate that. I do think, though, flatting is tight but not terrible. Folding, that is tight but not terrible. Flatting is my preferred option. And jamming is a bit of an overbet, but it is reasonable here and could definitely be a profitable option. So small blind jams. If hijack folds, we're definitely going to call it off here. Once hijack calls as well, I would just fold this hand. We don't really want to fold, but even when our hand is best, the hijack might have high equity against us. It's going to be tough to get away in a later street, so I would just fold here. A few more folds. And with ace-jack, I think it's safe to say we're not going to fold here. In fact, we would get a warning. We're trying to fold here when it is free to check. Now, the obvious play here is to jam, and I like jamming. This is strong enough in a blind versus blind context. A small blind might be on a range that's relatively close to any 2 cards. That I like putting out a raise here to 275 and trying to get the small blind to make a bigger mistake. I think we have a little bit too much fold equity jamming here. So, again, I wouldn't check. I think jamming is the more common play and a totally good play, and I have a slight preference for making it 275. Here jams, gets it heads up. And now let's talk about ace-10 offsuit. So here at the ace-10, this to me is one where there's one clear correct play, which is to jam. We're out of position, effective stack is under 20 blinds, our hand does not play super well. So only play here is to jam. Let's go ahead and see if Hero makes that play, which he does. Very nice. Fold the ace-5 suited. And this is an interesting one with king-jack off. So what I would do here if the hijack unfolded is I would ISO. Go ahead and make it, say, 350. With the hijack calling as well and it being for quite a bit of a stack, it really depends on his stats and what we know about him. We could go ahead and still ISO and make it, say, 433 with the plan of getting it in against him, folding of, say, the small blind jam. For offsuit, though, king-jack offsuit, I'm not going to be flatting here. I would go ahead and either 3-bet the ISO or fold. And as played or fold, let's see if anybody had anything strong. So I will say that Hero had great equity pre-flop, in that sense it's successful. Here with the ace-king, we can just go ahead and jam. So the effective stack is 15 blinds. We'll win that one. Jack 10 offsuit in the low jack, it's fine to either min raise or fold here. Here tosses it. 5 deuce, I wouldn't jam. I would just go ahead and check. And we can either hit or bet a lot if our opponent checks to us. So here I would definitely bet if our opponent checks. And this is a pretty coordinated flop. At the same time, we have absolutely no showdown value. So this is a pretty simple one to play. We can just go ahead, bet something like 185, and try to take it away immediately. As played, I would still stab if our opponent checked turn. But typically on a flop like this, what you want to do is be fairly polarized. So when you've got total air, you bet. And when you have a reasonably strong hand, you bet. So for example, hands you would definitely want to bet would be 10x hand, you bet for value. 5 deuce, I like betting. If I had a hand like Queen 7, that's the kind of hand that I'm going to be more inclined to check. This is interesting. Here limps the ace 10 instead of jamming it, looking to get action, maybe having a read that the big blind shoves pretty wide in these spots. So I like this. We're out of position here, which is going to make us a bit more inclined to just jam or at least put in a raise. But if you know that the big blind is a player who attacks limps a lot, this is a nice way to induce that. And that's what happened. We got in pre with high equity. And it looks like Euro is acting very nicely on some of these reads when you combine a hand like this with the pocket queens on the king high flop hand. So here we just go ahead and jam. I think the bottom of our shoving range here is going to be queen jack offsuit. So these are good ones to ICMize. And I have this set to pull up in MTT mode. So this is going to incorporate pre-final table ICM in ICMizer based on the program's estimates of number of players remaining. So let's see if queen jack offsuit is correct as bottom of range. And yeah, so queen jack offsuit basically break even. Go into pocket fives, ace 5 suited, ace 10 off. And king queen off, of course, a correct jam. So let's look here at pocket sevens. Now, I'm not actually sure. We've had the same player on our right. I should have looked at his screen name, who was doing a lot of min raise folding off a relatively short effective stack. So it'd be nice if we knew for sure if it was that player. But either way, my default play would be to jam here. And the way I look at a spot like this is that if our opponent shoved, we could put it in. Because he's going to have basically all the pocket pairs below us. He's going to have all of the suited aces, or these should. So we're about 2-to-1 favorite against those. So we normally shouldn't have a spot where we would shove if our opponent did, but fold when our opponent raises small instead. The time we can vary that is if we've got some kind of read. Typical read here, opponent is tight aggressive. Okay, he's playing like, conventional 15-30, solid snug, tight aggressive game. We think he's just doing this to induce, and then we make an exploitive fold. But again, normally I jam the sevens. Let's see what happens here. We will get to see. And so queen 10 suited, kind of an unusual hand to min raise there before just open shoving that. But anyway, that's why I would shove the pocket sevens. So 5 deuce off. Now this is interesting. So if you're getting exactly 2-to-1 with a trash hand, you should fold. Here we're getting 2.3 to 1, which is right around the cusp. I will go ahead and call here, but I think this is going to be basically completely break even. So I don't really think we're going to make much of a mistake. Let's let the program pull this one up. But like for sure, if you're getting 2.5 to 1, unless there's heavy ICM, you should fold. You should call. If you're getting 2-to-1, you should fold. And like 2.3 to 1 is going to be right around the cusp of break evenness. And sure enough, it shows up as 0.00. Ace 6 is going to be a jam. few more folds. Queen 7 suited we're going to fold. I would jam down to Queen 9 suited. Of course, Ace King offsuit, we're going to be happy to shove. Here the effective stack would have to be over 20 blinds before we would consider a small 3-bet. Another fold with Ace 4. And 8-4 suited we're going to toss. So in this instance, I would jam down to 8-6 suited. I would also shove 6-5 suited. So 8-4 suited is relatively high up in our folding range. 9-8 we fold. Good jam here with the ace queen suited. So typically if we have 10 blinds or less from hijack or later, we can shove any ace. I know ace queen suited is a little bit more than just any ace, but thinking about a spot like this a bit more generally. And here queen jack offsuit, I would jam. This is going to be pretty break even. So normally 10 blinds under the gun, I will go any pair, any suited ace, ace 9 offsuit, queen jack off. But the hands at the bottom of that range are going to be very break even. So queen jack off, pocket deuces, ace 9 off. Those are hands that are, going to be right around 0 to shove. So this is totally fine. Like if we have king queen off, we have to jam. And queen jack off, it's reasonable to jam or fold. One other thing that we'll say is that if you look at, say, the hijack, he's got under 5 blinds, so he's not quite as important. If you had 3 players who are all under 5 blinds, then we should be more inclined to jam. Queen jack offsuit once again. Everybody respecting hero. So with king 7 suited, I would shove here. And if the big blind calls with any 2 cards, we have good equity against his range. Cutoff is pretty short, so I believe this is going to be a profitable shove. I will go ahead and double check that. Folding is definitely okay here. I think by king 9 suited, we absolutely have to shove. King deuce suited, I for sure would not shove. But for me, king 7 suited would be bottom of range. Again, we're going to go ahead and check this. And we'll notice here it says that the program says about 32 other players are remaining. And here I am wrong. Hero is correct to fold. King 7 suited. I mean, it wouldn't be egregious, but it's slightly wide here. So good fold. For us, we should jam. King 3 off, definitely a call. So this is going to be a real mistake. Even if there's a lot of page jump activity, we're getting 2 to 1, we have a king. Normally, if we're facing a jam of 5 blinds or less, we're in the big blind, we should call with any king. And here, some of the time our opponent is going to have hands that we're even a favorite against. Our opponent could certainly have a hand like queen 9 suited or, jack 9 suited. Probably suited queen and suited jack hands are the easiest to name that we're far ahead of. Of course, he could also have some kind of hand like 7-6 suited, 10-9 off. But the point here is that I will go ahead and make this call. Kings, we have a good jam and get a fold. Very nice. All folds until king 10, which we're going to call here blind on blind. Happily call with any king. And this is a pretty great flop. I feel like we have to hit this, which we do, and here we needed to. It's going to be a fold with the ace 5 suited. That's correct, unless the hijack is opening super wide. And here with 16 blinds, we definitely have enough chips to min raise. I think we're going to get a lot more value this way. So this is a good small raise. And it looked like an awesome flop. Here at the turn, sorry about that. Drop here at the turn, river that is, I think that we might not have the winner anymore, but let's check. It's possible nobody has the ace or nine. And that's funny, we lose to another flop set. King, queen off. We're going to call here and we'll win that one. And king jack offsuit, when our opponent raises, we're just going to fold. So what would we do here if he had folded? I would min raise this hand, and we're going to be folding facing most players' jam. But the thing is here is that this is we don't only have to be playing hands that we're going to stack off with. And we want to have a raise call range. If we have pocket aces, we want to raise call. We don't want to just jam. So a hand like an offsuit Broadway hand is a good one to raise fold because it's pretty marginal to just open shove. And at the same time, we do have blockers to our opponent's 3-bet shove ranges. Here we're not going to defend the 8 deuce off. And with pocket sixes, this is definitely just going to be an open shove. So here pretty much any pocket pair, 10 blinds or less, any position, we can just jam. And certainly, even though we're at 11 blinds, sixes are much stronger than deuces. We're in late position. So we're going to go ahead and jam here. And we're going to pick up in part 2 with the late game of this $2 180 man. Thanks a lot for watching. This has been Collin Moshman for TournamentPokerEdge.com.